very much. Welcome. Next, I think we'd like to hear from Ms. Marion Gray-Hopkins. She's a mother of 3 adult children, grandmother of 6, great-grandmother of 2. She's currently retired after nearly 40 years in the banking industry. Her son, Gary A. Hopkins, Jr., was killed by police in 1999. She's participated in numerous marches and rallies to support reform against police brutality. Most recently, she was engaged with the Code Pink organization to hear the stories firsthand from mothers across the country who've lost their sons at the hands of police violence. She's a member of the PG County People's Coalition for Justice and is actively involved in working towards reform of laws to stop the unjust killings of people of color. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all for having me here to give me the opportunity to tell Gary's story. Again, my name is Marion Gray-Hopkins, and I'm Gary Hopkins' mother. And again, he was murdered on November 27, 1999 by Prince George's County police officers. And I'm calling their names out, Brian Catlett and Devin White. Gary was smart. Gary, he's a very intelligent kid. He was fun-loving. Just an all-around great kid. He was in his 2nd year of college, so he wasn't just your regular standard as they, try to identify, our black youth as being out in the streets. He was a homebody kid. He was a great kid. He was a 2nd year college student, and he worked a part-time job at the nursing home because he loved the elderly and how wise the elderly were. So just 16 days prior to his death, his dad, my husband, died of bone cancer. So his supervisor said, it'd be a great idea, Gary, if you hang out, go out, and he was hosting, his supervisor, a dance at a local fire station. He thought this would get Gary's mind off of his father's death. So Gary called a lot of his friends, and they all got together, and they went to the fire station that night, and one of his friends is here tonight that was there the night of Gary's killing. And thank you for being here, Tanil. And so, they went to the dance. They were, one of his friends got into an altercation with someone else, with one of the other party goers. And Gary was always mentor to his friends. He was always a peacemaker. So that night, Gary breaks up the fight. He gets everybody into their respective vehicles, and he was always joking. He was always a jokester. So he's a passenger in the lead vehicle. He sits on the ledge of the car, kicking his legs, waving everybody on. Well, Officer Devin White blocks the exit, will not allow them to exit. So, he comes up, gun drawn, Gary sitting on the ledge of the car. He comes up to Gary, puts the gun to his head. It's winter. He grabs Gary by his collar. He stumbles forward, and as he stumbles forward, the 2nd officer, Brian Catlett, gets 1 shot to the chest, straight aim to Gary's heart. Gary falls to the ground, and we're at the fire station. They come out, they grab Gary's body off the street and almost to the exit. Would not allow any of his friends to give him the attention he needed to try to save his life. So he died there, on the spot. That night, the officers take all of the people that they felt were witnesses down to the station, take their statement that very night. What is interesting about, some of the bills that we're asking the legislature to vote on is an officer has 10 days at a minimum to give their statement. They say because of the mental stress that they're going through because of the shooting. What about the mental stress of the victims and the victims' friends and family? What about their stress? So they get 10 days. So part of the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, we're asking that they modify, and it is in there to amend that, so that they don't have the 10 days. They should be held to a higher standard, not the standard of the civilians, but at a higher standard. Also, as part of that, there is the Internal Affairs Division, and they go through and they have 3 people on a panel, 3 people of the police officers' peers, that sits down and they investigate, do an internal investigation to determine if there was any wrongdoing. I will tell you that there is camaraderie with the police department. There is that blue wall of silence with the police department. And there is, if they come out and rat on their own, they will be blackballed. I personally received a number of calls anonymously from police officers saying, you need to follow this all the way through. Your son was killed wrongfully. But they dare not come forward because, again, they would be blackballed. So of course they did their investigation and there was no wrongdoing, you know, and that's what you're always going to hear. So after that, I hear people say, well, we need to indict more of the police officers. I got that opportunity. At that time, Jack Johnson was the state's attorney, and for political reasons, he indicted the police officer that did the fatal shooting, but not the officer that precipitated that entire event. We went to court. It was like a circus show in court. The police officer, and it is his right, wanted a jury versus a jury of his peers. We sat there in that courtroom for an entire week with what we knew was enough evidence to prosecute that police officer. In addition to that, the coroner's report said that Gary's, and based on the trajectory of the wound, his hands had to be up. The judge would not allow the testimony without any explanation. So we know that there is a camaraderie between all of them. But what we're asking for is an independent state prosecutor, that someone that is fully trained, who understands these type of killings or these brutalities that police officers are doing. Jack Johnson put on the case an attorney that had never tried a murder case. You're going to put, if you would think if you're going up against the best that money can buy, funded by the fraternal order, that you're going to get somebody who at least knows about murder cases, and yet it's still the high-profile police killing. But they put an attorney who had never done a murder case. So of course we went through the 7 days. The judge says he was inattentive through the whole trial and wasn't even paying any attention, because I felt as though they knew what the outcome was going to be at the beginning of that trial. He says, I'm going to lunch. I'll be back with my verdict. He came back right after lunch and said all charges are dismissed. He was acquitted on all charges. So one of the other things that I wanted to say, that, you know, these officers, again, and we had yesterday, and I stayed for some of the testimony, because it was darn near 10 o'clock, they were still testifying. So the opposition was again saying that officers need that 10-day to get their attorney or to get counsel, just in case there is a criminal charge made against them. And I will tell you guys, we're going to need your support. My son was a writer. He loved to write. I mean, he was a rapper, he was a writer, and one of the things he wrote in his final paper was, it takes a village to bring about change. We all here are part of that village. I will ask of you that you get with your legislators and you ask them to vote favorable for these bills that will stop the senseless killings of our people of color. Thank you.